All right, well, welcome to Life in the Garden. I'm very excited for this series. I'll give a little intro about myself. Yeah, so this is like a young Tim mood board. So I grew up in a really devout evangelical family with a very coherent worldview that made sense of everything. And at 22, my faith fell apart. The worldview that I'd received had holes that I couldn't unsee. And in my 20s, I went looking for tools that could do what my inherited frameworks couldn't do, and found them in mindfulness, contemplation, and therapy. And these tools didn't just patch the old worldview, they've opened up something larger. And when artificial intelligence like ChatGPT and Claude came along, those tools turned out to be really useful for stitching everything together and making sense of everything. And about 3 months ago, I was exploring some questions with Claude around the origins of the Noah flood story. And suddenly an incredible picture came into focus. Archaeology, neuroscience, biblical studies, history, all started clicking together into a picture that I'd never been handed by a tradition. And that is what's become this Life in the Garden series. The framework we're going to explore honors the evangelical intuition that the Bible stories actually happened. And it honors the progressive intuition that the earth is old and the evidence that we have is real. The framework doesn't leave anyone out. It doesn't leave out the other religions. It doesn't leave out the atheists, who in this picture are exclusively European. And maybe best of all, it doesn't leave out our ancestors. And so throughout the series, we're going to have these two driving questions, which we'll keep returning to. The first is, when was the garden? And we'll be using all the fields of knowledge we have available to create an actual historical timeline pointing when it happened. And then second, what was the fall about? Using everything we know to describe what life was like before, what happened at the fall, how did it happen, why did it happen, and ultimately why things are the way they are now. So I hope this series gives us 4 things. Number 1, it's real close to my heart, is a renewed vision for Christianity that integrates and inspires rather than excluding others and postponing restoration to the afterlife. Second thing is a map that makes sense of where we are, how we got here. A connection to our ancestors that you may not have felt before. And a way forward that anyone can participate in. Okay, few notes of housekeeping. So I'm treating this series really as a workshop. It's the first time I've put this together into any kind of format. The second thing is that everything is very much open for questioning. Nothing has been academically verified by anyone with real authority. I've been reliant on AI to do the heavy lifting of research and synthesis, which I think will be a really interesting part of the series and something we can dive into. But that said, I think what we're going to run through is really powerful and is headed towards some sort of scientific credibility. There's 3 specific neuroscientific studies that are adjacent to actual studies that have been run at Brown, NYU, University of Wisconsin. And at some point, I'd like to pitch them to those labs, which sounds crazy. Yeah, again, I'm using AI to aggregate evidence. There's sources for everything, but I haven't read them yet. But ultimately, nothing needs to be believed because I'm showing evidence. The evidence is there. We can debate about it. We can take more time after this series is done to flesh it out and make it more rigorous. Ultimately, the real test is in your own lived experience. Does this resonate with what life is like for me? And I think more interesting to me than any sort of academic success is that this resonates in the Christian community, which is my home tradition. Okay. Everybody hanging in there?
Oh, yeah. So good. Good
Cool.
so far.
All right. So tonight's episode is called Two Modes of Attention. Part 1. Attention is the beginning. So I wanted to start with this quote by American poet Mary Oliver, which Michael will often quote on a Sunday morning in church as we take a moment of quiet to settle in before the sermon. I Googled it, and this article from The Atlantic came up saying, the late poet Mary Oliver warned us against looking without noticing. In an age of distraction, her work is more urgent than ever. And this line, attention is the beginning of devotion, is this line that Michael will say in church. I won't spend really any time describing the attention economy. I'm sure we're all quite familiar with it. But there are massive amounts of effort and infrastructure built to harvest our attention and turn it into dollars. I trust we're all quite aware of the way our attention is pulled. And I think the history books will certainly define our era around this dynamic. And then just to root this in the Bible talks a lot about mindfulness of your attention and your thoughts. A few examples: keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life. Proverbs. Jesus says, the eye is the lamp of the body, so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. The quality of the attention literally determines the quality of the organism. And in Genesis, the Lord God called unto Adam. The Lord God called unto Adam and said unto him, where art thou? This is Genesis 3:9. So God's first question after the fall is an attention question. Not what did you do, but where are you? As in, where has your attention gone? Something has been hidden. So we're going to simplify Mary Oliver's statement to simply, attention is the beginning. And this is going to be the foundation for the entire Life in the Garden series. And I think it's pretty safe to stand on, quite self-evident. And the assertion is that nothing that actually happens without attention. All right, so let's dive into it. What is attention? Well, attention is one of those things we can't really say what it is directly in a definition. At least it's very difficult to do that, but we can describe it and build a feel for it. So in every human, there are two modes of attention. Actually, in every animal, from worms to humans, there are two modes of attention: open attention and focal attention. So open attention is a lot like hearing. It's attentive but effortless. Sound comes to your ears without strain. You just hear it. It's like the open sky. You hear all of it at once and nothing is hidden. Focal attention is much more like a spotlight. Most of the environment is actually tuned out and put in the dark so that attention can focus on that one thing. And to illustrate this, we'll use an eagle. So picture an eagle soaring up over the mountains. This is like the open mode. And then imagine an eagle closing in on a prey in the water, a fish. This illustrates the focal mode. So when an eagle is soaring high at 10,000 feet, it's completely safe. Nobody's up there. Nobody's going to bother it. It can relax and take everything in. It's vigilant, but it's relaxed. And this is why the open mode is like hearing. You can just imagine how the eagle is actively taking it all in, listening to the landscape, seeing what's available. And it's seeing everything. Nothing that is visible is not seen by the eagle. But in the focal mode, where the eagle is diving down to catch a fish, it's completely focused. And it actually neurologically tunes out the vast majority of what it has access to so that it can focus completely on the fish it has spotted and wants to catch. It's summoning all of its faculties to nab this fish. The eagle is locked in, hurtling downward. So much so that after it catches its prey, it may not even notice a rival bird is swooping in to steal the meal. A moment ago, the eagle had no clue that another bird was nearby because its attention was locked in. And now that it's being attacked, it'll instinctively open the attention back up so it can deal with the situation. And the remarkable thing is that every animal that's more complex than a jellyfish runs both of these modes of attention at the same time. I've shown the eagle as if it runs one or the other, soaring then diving, but it actually makes these two modes just easy to see. Even in the dive, the eagle's open mode is still running, and it's just that the focus mode is so dominant that in the moment it's diving, the open mode can barely get a word in, so to speak. And that's why another bird can steal the catch. Not because the open mode shut off, but because it was drowned out. And a simple example of this is driving your car. So there's a part of you that's paying attention in the focal mode, gripping the steering wheel, shifting the pedals. Those parts of your body are doing very specific things. But you're also open and viewing the world at large, broadly aware of what's going around you. And all of this is happening simultaneously without a whole lot of effort. Okay. So that's a lot of information. Wanted to root this in an experience. And if you've done any of the mindfulness classes I've run, you'll probably have tried this, but I just want to quickly run a practical experiment for you. So take a moment and look at your hand. You can just put it up in front of you and look at your hand. And now simply notice how attention is going down like a spotlight beam, coming from your eyes and forehead area and going down to your hand. See if you can get a sense for that. Your hand is this object at a distance, and you are peering down the spotlight of attention pointed at it. Your hand has your attention. So if you have a sense for that, that is the focal mode of attention. You've just discovered the focal mode. Now move your hand out of sight. Don't close your eyes, but move your hand to somewhere where you can't see it. And now feel your hand from within your hand. Notice all of the tingly, sparkly information going on within your hand. And notice that the fact of your hand being there has nothing to do with your eyes or your head. There's a wellspring of sensation within the hand that exists on its own. And this mode is the open mode. It's much more like listening to your hand. Okay, so hopefully that revealed something about the two modes of attention. Now, what does attention do? This is also tricky to answer. Attention attends to things. Attention is aware of stuff. Again, it's a little difficult to say exactly what it is in a useful way, but we can look at how life moves and get a sense for it that way. So in the evolutionary tree, our earliest ancestors come from three lineages who only had one mode of direction and one mode of attention. They only had one mode of attention, and interesting, life had no direction. So the sponge sits on the ocean floor. It has no brain, no nerves, no movement. Each cell in the sponge senses the water around it and responds on its own. If food drifts past one side, that side responds. The other side doesn't know and doesn't care. Alive, but with no center, no coordination, no awareness of the whole. The comb jelly pulses through the dark water. It can move, but not toward anything in particular. It drifts where the current takes it, pulsing, approaching something like direction, but never quite arriving. And the jellyfish is probably the closest to us. You touch one point and the whole body contracts, a single coordinated response. But the signal spreads everywhere equally. There's no front, no back, no left, no right. Every part of the body gets the same message. It can react, but it can't choose a direction. It can't say this way, not that way. It only pulses. Then, 550 million years ago, something amazing happened. Something crawls through the mud head first. Worms. One side of the body does something different from the other for the first time. The focal mode of attention processes approach. There's something interesting, let's move towards it. The spotlight turns on. The open receiving mode of attention processes avoidance. Something's dangerous, stay alert. And between those two signals, meeting at a tiny cluster of neurons in the front end, choice is created. Go this way, not that way. The two modes don't look like much yet, just two different poles meeting in the middle. But that meeting is attention as we experience it. The first moment anything in the history of life weighed one signal against another and moved accordingly. Every eagle dive, every human love, every moment of recognition is an elaboration of what this worm just did. Studies of baby chickens revealed something remarkable. So in chicks, the right eye locks onto a single seed among the grit and the dirt. This is the focal mode, selecting, zeroing in, this one, not that one. The left eye simultaneously holds the entire surrounding field in a wide open scan, which may be a little difficult to see, but this blue semicircle, that's the open mode, receiving everything it has access to, committed to nothing, alert to whatever might appear. The worm chooses between approach and avoidance, one or the other. The chick does both simultaneously. The focal mode nourishes, the open mode protects, and neither interferes with the other. The seed eye doesn't distract the sky eye. Two completely different jobs running in parallel, each one doing exactly what the other can. The chick demonstrates the ability to care for detail without losing the whole. This is the elegance of the open and focal architecture. All right, everything changes with mammals because the two modes stop being just about survival and become about feeling. Watch a dog greet someone it loves. The whole body leans in. The tail wags to the right, the focal mode reaching toward what it wants, warmth. Yes, this is my person. Now watch that same dog encounter a stranger. The body stiffens, the tail shifts. The open mode reading the room, uncertain, assessing, who is this? What's unlocked here is staggering. For the first time in evolutionary history, the two modes are carrying emotion, not just scanning for hawks or targeting seeds, feeling. The open mode reads the emotional field. Is this safe? Is this tense? Is this being in front of me happy or afraid? The focal mode acts on what the open mode receives, approaches, nuzzles, leans in. And the remarkable thing is that both beings know it. The dog feels you, you feel the dog. Something is passing between you that neither of you decided to send. The interior has become visible. Your feeling and my feeling are in conversation without a word being spoken. The seed of every friendship, every marriage, every moment of being truly met by another living being, that seed is here in the mammalian body 200 million years ago. And these two modes have now become the architecture of intimacy. The chimp's focal mode is guiding a thin stick into a termite mound at exactly the right angle, applying exactly the right pressure, waiting exactly the right moment before withdrawing it, covered in protein. Technical mastery of a tool. But the chimp's awareness isn't in its hands. The open mode is in the room. Who's watching? Who's dominant? Who might take the termites when they come out? Who was generous yesterday? A social world of staggering complexity running underneath the precise technical task like an ocean under a fishing boat. What's new is this. A chimp who was slighted this morning will wait until the afternoon, find an ally, and approach the dominant male together. A chimp who discovers food will glance at who's watching before deciding whether to share it or hide it, modeling what another being knows based on what that being can see. A chimp will fake a limp for sympathy, then walk normally when no one's looking, holding two versions of itself at the same time. No chimp has ever described what it's doing, but the open mode has become something the dog didn't have, an interior workspace where scenarios can be assembled, tested, and revised before they're acted on. And finally, us. What happens in the chimp catches fire in humans. The focal mode's modeling, aimed outward in the chimp, tracking what she'll do, who's watching, how to play it, becomes something far more powerful. A human can hold a plan that stretches across seasons, can tell a story where a character inside the story tells a story, can teach a child something by describing a situation neither of them is in, can stand at the edge of a cliff, look at the stars, and wonder what they are. What this unlocks is breathtaking. The focal mode can hold a shared image of something that doesn't exist yet, and a group of humans can work toward it together across years. A navigator can hold a map of stars and currents and wind patterns inside her mind and cross open ocean to an island she's never seen. A grandmother can send experience across generations inside language. The child hearing it can feel it, learn from it, carry it forward. And the open mode is holding all of it. A hunter can model the animal so precisely, where it sleeps, what it fears, how it moves when the wind shifts, that the hunt becomes almost a conversation between two minds, one of them silent. That precision is the focal mode. But reading the forest, sensing the wind, feeling the animal's presence before seeing it, that's the open mode. A healer can hold the image of a healthy body alongside the reality of a sick one and work the gap between them. Focal mode on the diagnosis, open mode on the person. A singer can take a feeling that has no name and give it a shape and a sound that makes every person hearing it recognize something they knew but couldn't say. The focal mode shapes the sound. The open mode is where the feeling lives. So here's the puzzle. These two modes have been working together for over 500 million years. orientation, dual presence, intimacy, social intelligence, worlds within worlds, an unfolding so rich it produced everything from the worm's first choice to a grandmother's story. Every animal we've looked at runs both modes, and none of them seem to be at war with themselves. So why are we? Why does the species with the most powerful version of this architecture also produce the most suffering? What happened to us? Well, a psychiatrist named Iain McGilchrist spent 30 years asking this question, and he traced it back to these modes of attention with a simple question. What happens if one of them takes over? What happens if the narrow, grasping, categorizing mode stops working alongside the broad, open mode and starts running the whole show? And his answer is that you get the modern world, efficient, productive, optimized, and flat, because the mode that reduces things to parts in order to use them has become the default, and the mode that encounters things whole has been sidelined. And that takes us to part 2, the master and his emissary. But before we continue, how's it? Everybody hanging in there? Any questions or?
I'm here.
Awesome. All right, so the master and his emissary. So the psychiatrist we just introduced, Iain McGilchrist, his work is where all of the stuff we just looked at originated for me. It's where I learned about it. And in 2009, he published a really big book, 600-page book called The Master and His Emissary. It was a study on these two modes of attention, what each one does, how they relate, and what happens when that relationship breaks down, all explored through the lens of a fable that originates with Friedrich Nietzsche. And the fable goes like this. Once upon a time, a wise spiritual master ruled a small but prosperous domain. He didn't govern it by mapping every acre or counting every grain. He governed it by dwelling in it, the way you know your own body. He knew when the season was turning before anyone could measure it. His rule was quiet, and under that quiet rule, everything flourished. And so the domain grew. The master couldn't be everywhere himself, and more importantly, he realized there were certain matters he must not become involved in if he was going to preserve his sense of the whole. So he appoints his most gifted and trusted assistant as an emissary, a manager, sharp, articulate, capable, and the manager's job is to go out into the territory, handle the details, and report back. And the emissary is brilliant at it. Everywhere he goes, he's the one that the people deal with. He's the face, the voice, the decision maker on the ground. He learned everything that the master taught him, and he could sort, measure, organize, and report extremely effectively. He was indispensable. But this emissary, while very bright, wasn't bright enough to know what it was that he didn't know. The emissary began spending more and more time away from the master, and when he did look back, all he saw was an old man sharing a meal with a neighbor under a tree. No scrolls, no ledgers, no visible output. What does he know? The emissary thought. I'm the one who does all the hard work around here. I'm the one who really knows. And so little by little, the emissary stopped reporting back. He answered questions the master used to answer. He made decisions the master used to make. People came to him first, and then only to him. Before long, no one remembered quite what the master was for. The emissary ran everything now. Everything that could be measured was measured. Everything that could be managed was managed. But the emissary had a fatal limitation. He could analyze the soil, but not feel the season turning. He could count the grain, but not sense the famine coming. The master had known which neighbor was struggling before they asked, had known when to plant by feel of the ground, had known things he could never have explained to the emissary, even if the emissary had thought to ask. And now no one was knowing those things. The village still ran, but something at the center of it had gone quiet. And eventually the gardens went untended, the neighbors stopped gathering, the emissary worked harder and harder, and everything he touched grew less and less alive. And the whole community, the master and the emissary, fell to ruin. The end. Great story. So the interpretation is this. So McGilchrist tells this story because he thinks it describes the way that these two modes of attention work. As we just spent the first chunk learning, these two modes of attention are not two skill sets. They're more like two different ways of being present to the world. One is broad, open, and receptive. It takes the whole scene without grabbing any particular piece of it, but it knows it. The other mode of attention is narrow, focused, precise. It zeroes in, names things, sorts things, gets things done. And McGilchrist says you need both, but the real question is which one is in charge. The master in the story governs by dwelling. He knows when the season is turning. He knows which neighbor is struggling. He couldn't explain how he knows what he knows. If you asked him to produce a report and explain it, he probably couldn't. This is the broad mode. It's how you know your closest friend is upset before they say a word. It's how a farmer reads the sky. It's how a mother knows something is wrong with her child from across the room. It isn't mystical, it's intuitive, it's direct, and it's the oldest kind of intelligence we have. The emissary in the story is the narrow mode. He's brilliant, he can sort, measure, plan, organize, report. He can take the master's broad knowing and turn it into something you can act on, a schedule, a budget, a sentence, a map. But he's always working on representations, not the live thing itself. He works with a picture of the thing, a name for the thing, a model of the thing, a plan of the thing. Every useful thing that civilization has ever built has come through the focal mode. Language, agriculture, medicine, law. It's not the villain, it's the most gifted servant in the world. And here's what McGilchrist is really saying. The question isn't which mode is better, it's which one leads. The master dwells and the servant acts on what the master knows. The farmer reads the sky, that's the broad mode, then he decides when to plant. That's the narrow mode, in service. The mother senses something is wrong, broad mode, then she asks the right question, narrow mode, in service. One knows, the other does. The doing has to serve the knowing, not the other way around. But here's the problem, and this is the key to the whole parable. The relationship between the master and the servant is not symmetrical. The master knows he needs the servant. After all, he appointed him. The master would never try to dominate the servant's work because he understands that they each do something the other can't. But the servant doesn't have that same understanding. The servant's whole mode of attention is designed to tune out the vast majority of available information, to limit the picture so that he can manipulate it, so that he can zero in and get a specific task done. That's his gift, that's his capacity. But it means that he literally doesn't have access to the full picture of the master. The servant, by nature, doesn't know there's anything beyond his narrow scope. And so he can't comprehend why the master is necessary at all. And will efficiently throw the baby out with the bathwater and move on, checking the box that the task is done. And this is where the story gets real, because McGilchrist's claim isn't that this is just a parable, it's a diagnosis. And his diagnosis is that in the modern world, the narrow mode has gradually taken over. We measure everything, we optimize everything, we build entire systems, education, medicine, economics, even religion, around the assumption that if you can't measure it, it isn't real. If you can't be certain, it doesn't count. And this has generated an enormous mess. You would never go to town planting seeds for the hell of it without some larger purpose and plan in mind. That would be insane. That would be something an AI robot does. And McGilchrist is indicating that that's where we're at as a culture. Similarly, you would never try to comfort your child if there weren't a larger picture that something was wrong in the child's experience. If you were constantly trying to comfort your child 24/7 because you thought that's what a good parent does, and so you're constantly comforting them, you'd be insane. Your child would certainly start to feel stressed out, and nobody would, in their right mind, would say that this is what good parenting looks like. But we might say that this is what good human resources looks like. Not to bash on human resources, but the whole discipline of human resources is designed to do such thing. Comforting for the sake of comforting without any grounded sense of how healthy are our employees? How well are we treating them? How well are they treating each other? Which are really how the master would approach these kinds of questions. The Western medical field is a really great example. Just simply, if you feel like something's wrong, they'll give you a pill. I recently pulled a muscle in my back. It was taking longer than I expected to heal. I was getting a little worried about it. Maybe I did something. I needed to do a annual physical anyways. So I scheduled the physical and figured that the doctor can look at my back when I'm in the office. And it's probably fine anyways. It just needs more time, but I'd like to get it checked out. So I get to the physical, I get into the exam room, and the nurse greets me first, asks me what I'm here for, and I explained. And immediately she says, "Oh, well, he can't look at your back. You're here for a physical." It was absurd. Who should I talk to about my back? The receptionist? Thankfully, the doctor was chill, and we did talk about my back, but he never once looked at it. He never inspected it. He never touched it. He made absolutely no contact with my back. He was glued to his laptop. He had a checklist procedure, and based on my description, told me he can't help me. I need to see a physical therapist. Essentially, that's the next step in the machine algorithm. Now, the church is full of these examples. This one's a bit dark, but the reality is that the church as an institution built to nurture, serve, and shelter the vulnerable became an institution that consumes them. And if that wasn't throwing the baby out with the bathwater enough, it has systematically protected predators, sealing the possibility that the cycle will happen again. Where is the wisdom in that? This is a more recent one. I've been seeing a lot of headlines on this. January 2025, Elon Musk was appointed to lead the Department of Government Efficiency. The goal was to cut $2 trillion in government waste. He promised to put agencies through the wood chipper. Over 260,000 federal employees lost their jobs. USAID, the largest humanitarian aid agency in the world, was gutted. Its programs cut by 83%. CDC food safety surveillance was scaled from 8 pathogens down to 2. A 30-year tracking program gone. And the results are a Lancet study projects 14 million additional deaths globally by 2030 from the aid cuts alone. 4.5 million of them children under 5, dying of diarrhea, pneumonia, and malnutrition. And right now, a parasite outbreak is spreading across 30 states, that the CDC is no longer equipped to track. And the government has quietly posted over 100,000 job listings to rehire for the positions it just eliminated. No final report was issued, no accounting of what was saved or what was lost. Doge officially shut down on July 4th, 2026. A few more examples. We raise 9 billion chickens a year in buildings where they never see sunlight, and we call it efficient. Industrialized schooling, where kids are trained to know what a participle is, but have no clue how to do their taxes, let alone regulate their emotions or understand what makes life worth living. And AI is a great example of this. People using AI to produce slop content, art, music, who literally haven't mastered an actual craft, now have tools to produce things that look like very high quality, but have no soul. All servant, no master. And you can let me know if this falls under that category of slop. Perhaps the most powerful image in this master emissary model is a cancer cell. So a cancer cell is a cell that has stopped listening to its neighbors. Essentially, the open mode is shut down. Normal, healthy cells are in constant communication with the cells around them, listening for signals that say to grow, stop, and die when it's time. A cancer cell goes deaf to all that and simply replicates endlessly with no sense of proportion or limit until it kills the body that gave it life. And McGilchrist's work is resonating with people because this master and emissary offers a new paradigm, a new way of seeing what's happening, and it creates an extraordinary amount of clarity. I have really benefited from it, and it shapes the way I see the world. And even though what it reveals is very sobering, the clarity itself is really empowering. And now we'll turn to a source of wisdom that I don't believe McGilchrist has explored, but felt really obvious to me growing up as a Christian. And that is the trail of myths. So for me, when I first heard the master and emissary story, I immediately thought of the story of Lucifer. So Lucifer is the most brilliant and beautiful angel in all of creation, and he decides that he wants to rule with his own authority rather than serve God. This is the emissary grabbing for power that doesn't belong to him and cutting off the relationship to the master. He rebels and takes a third of the angels along with him, initiating an eternal war with God. Now, the Lucifer story is interesting for a number of reasons. It actually doesn't appear in the Bible, which was a surprise to me. The early church fathers stitched it together from a handful of verses in Isaiah, Ezekiel, Luke, and Revelation, attempting to create a picture of Satan and creating a picture of him as an angel who fell through pride. Augustine picks it up in the 5th century, but his version is still pretty bare bones. There's no drama, no lore. It's really just about angels who quietly preferred themselves to God, and he's naming that for himself and his readers. The story gradually accretes more detail and drama over the next 1,000 years until we get to John Milton's Paradise Lost in 1667. And this is where Satan finally gets Lucifer finally gets the line that everyone knows: better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. And perhaps the most surprising, in every version of this story, the problem with Lucifer is not that he's evil. The problem is that he's disconnected. Augustine says evil isn't even a thing. It's the absence of a thing. It's what happens when you turn away from the source of your own light and prefer yourself. So the Lucifer story is showing us that disconnected brilliance is the most dangerous force in the cosmos. Frankenstein, another story with this shape, master and emissary shape. A young scientist named Victor Frankenstein becomes obsessed with conquering death, something the master would never attempt. He works alone in secret for months, cutting himself off from his family, his friends, everything, stitching together a body from dead tissue and bringing it to life. It works, and the moment the creature opens its eyes, Frankenstein is so horrified by what he's made that he abandons it. The creature isn't evil, it's intelligent, sensitive, and actually desperate for connection. But it was made by a mind that had stopped answering to anything but itself. Brilliant enough to create life, not wise enough to look it in the eye. The Sorcerer's Apprentice is another story written by German writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe in 1797, and you may know it from Disney's Fantasia. So this is a fun one where a sorcerer leaves his workshop and his apprentice, played by Mickey Mouse, decides to use the master's magic to do his chores. He enchants a broom to carry water, and it works. The broom hauls bucket after bucket, and the apprentice is delighted. He's got the master's power, and the master isn't even here. But then he can't make it stop. He tries to make it stop, but he can't. So he splits the broom in two. He tries to destroy the broom with an axe, but instead of destroying the broom, now there are two brooms, both hauling water, with the room flooding. He tries everything. Nothing works. He has the master's tools, but not the master's understanding. Interestingly, this story resolves. The sorcerer returns and stops it with a word. The mess is cleaned up in an instant, not by more effort, but by the kind of knowing the apprentice never had. Zeus gives a woman named Pandora a jar, and he tells her not to open it. She tries to leave it alone, but she can't stop thinking about it. She picks it up, puts it down, walks away, comes back. And finally, she lifts the lid, just a crack, just to look, and outpour all the evils of the world. Disease, suffering, grief, death, everything that hadn't existed before. She slams the lid shut, but it's too late. Everything has escaped except one thing left at the bottom. This is an old one, 700 BCE, 700 years before Christ. Oh, I butchered that. Everything has escaped except the one thing left at the bottom, which is hope. So Pandora's box has a nice, positive, optimistic ending to it. Another story about disconnected brilliance. So Prometheus around 700 BCE in Greece. He's a titan, older than the Olympian gods, watches Zeus hoard fire from humanity, keeping humans cold in the dark, eating raw meat. Prometheus steals the fire, carries it down from Olympus in a hollow fennel stalk, and gives it to human beings. With fire comes everything: cooking, metalwork, warmth, light, civilization. Zeus is furious. He chains Prometheus to a rock at the edge of the world, and every day an eagle tears out Prometheus's liver. Every night it grows back. Every morning the eagle returns to eat out his liver. And this goes on forever. And what's interesting, the first few stories we looked at are more recent, last few hundred years. But Pandora, Prometheus, and the next ones we're going to look at are much more ancient. So Icarus, this should say 600 BCE. This comes from ancient Greece. Traditionally placed at the dawn of humanity. So Icarus's father, Daedalus, a master craftsman, builds 2 pairs of wings out of feathers and wax, so he and his son Icarus can escape the island where they're imprisoned. He tells his son Don't fly too low, or the sea spray will soak the feathers, and don't fly too high, or the sun will melt the wax. They take off. It works. Icarus feels the wind and the lift and the open sky and becomes intoxicated with the power. He starts climbing higher and higher. The wax softens, the feathers come loose. He falls into the sea. Daedalus lands alone. All right, the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11. So this likely originates between 800 and 500 BCE, written down by Israelite scribes during the Babylonian exile, and traditionally placed around 2200 BCE, 4,000 years ago, roughly. So in this story, all of humanity speaks one language. They settle on a plain and decide to build a city with a tower that reaches heaven, not to meet God, but to make a name for themselves. They have brick, they have mortar, they have coordination, they have ambition. They don't ask anyone for permission. God comes down to look at it and sees that their power is unlimited. So he steps in and actively limits it, scrambles their language so they can no longer understand each other. The building stops, they scatter across the earth. The city is called Babel. I have just a few more of these. So this story, the severing of heaven and earth, this comes from China, 800 BCE, traditionally placed around 2500 BCE, that it was actually where the oral tradition starts. And in that imagination, this is the beginning of the current order, the current age. So in the beginning, the passage between heaven and earth is open, spirits descend, humans ascend, and the two mingle freely. Anyone can communicate with the gods, but under the reign of Emperor Shao Hao, this becomes chaotic. Everyone is performing rites, everyone is summoning spirits, and the boundary between worlds dissolves into disorder. The next emperor commands two ministers to sever the passage. One lifts the sky, the other presses down on the land, and from then on, only authorized specialists can communicate with heaven. Everyone else is sealed on the ground. Rengi and Papa, very similar story that comes from the Maori tradition out of New Zealand. Also traditionally placed at the origin of the world, roughly traces to between 1000 and 500 BCE. So Rengi is the sky father and Papa the earth mother. They lie locked together in an embrace. Between their bodies, in total darkness, their children are crushed. There is no light. There is no room to stand. The children argue about what to do. One of them says, kill them. Another says, push them apart. The strongest lies on his back, plants his feet against his father, the sky, and pushes. Slowly, painfully, Rangi is torn from Papa. Light floods in for the first time. The children have room to breathe, to stand, to live. And Rangi weeps. His tears fall as rain. Papa's mists rise to meet him, and they have never stopped grieving. Popova, the clouding of vision. This comes from the Mayans, traditionally placed at the beginning of the current age, which would be 3114 BCE in the Mayan calendar, written down in the year 1500 after the Spanish made contact. Another one that is placed at the origin of the world. So in this story, the gods try to make humans. The first attempts fail. Mud dissolves, wood has no mind, but on the fourth attempt, they get it right. These humans are perfect. They can see everything. Their sight passes through trees, through rocks, through lakes. They can see to the edge of the world. They know everything the gods know. The gods look at what they have made and are troubled. They are only creatures, only formed things, they say, but their knowledge reaches too far. They see too much. So the gods cloud their eyes. They breathe on them the way that you breathe on a mirror. The humans can still see, but now only what is nearby. I know we're just over 8. We just have a few more minutes. Almost 10. This one comes from Africa. Similar story. Let's skip this one. And finally, the Garden of Eden. So this story is written down somewhere in the 5th or 6th century BCE, Israelite scribes during the Babylonian exile. Traditionally placed at the beginning of time, traditionally dated to between 3,000 and 4,000 BCE in the Jewish and Protestant traditions. So in this story, God makes man from dust and breathes life into him. He plants a garden and puts the man in it. In the center stands the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God says he can eat from any tree except that one. God makes a woman. A serpent tells her the fruit won't kill her. It will open her eyes and make her like God. She looks at the fruit. It's beautiful. She eats. She gives some to the man. He eats. Their eyes are opened. The first thing they notice is that they're naked. They hear God walking in the garden. They hide. God calls out, "Where are you?" God sends them out of the garden and stations an angel with a flaming sword at the entrance. Whew. All right. So all of these myths have the same shape that McGilchrist is outlining in his Master and Emissary critique of our modern culture. So just briefly, they involve a greater intelligence that is broad, whole, and in contact with everything. A lesser intelligence that is brilliant, capable, and narrow. Lucifer, the emissary. The lesser intelligence gains something real: fire, knowledge, room to stand, the ability to create, vision, coordination, independence. The gain costs the connection to the greater intelligence: exile, withdrawal, separation, severing, the master forgotten. The stories are explaining the current arrangement: why the gods are distant, why we're self-conscious, why the sky is high, why we suffer, why brilliance alone isn't enough. Most place this at the origin of the world or the current order, basically as far back as memory reaches. The greater intelligence is not destroyed. God still walks in the garden. The master is still around. The sorcerer returns. The lesser intelligence doesn't understand what it lost. The emissary can't see the master's knowing. Lucifer thinks God has made a mistake. Frankenstein runs from what he made. The apprentice thinks he has the master's power. Nobody gets what they wanted. Lucifer gets hell. Prometheus gets the rock. Pandora gets suffering. Icarus gets the sea. Babel gets scattered. The apprentice gets a flood. Frankenstein gets a monster. The problem is never that the lesser intelligence is evil. It's that it's disconnected. And so our two guiding questions for the series: when was the garden and what was the fall about? Become, when did the emissary usurp the master, and what the heck happened? And we'll dive into those questions next week in episode 2, Waking the Ancestors, where we'll trace the human story in more detail, looking for evidence of the fall in the deep past. The end. Thank you guys for sticking with me.